Okay, so in this video, we're going to be discussing the finals of Pinyin and Mandarin Chinese, the way they're represented in Pinyin, and the different endings that essentially end up in the different syllables in the pronunciations represented for each of the characters. Here we have the 6 basic vowels of Mandarin Chinese. These are not necessarily the only vowels that are used in spoken Mandarin Chinese, but they are the most common ones. There are only 6 vowel letters used in Pinyin. These are the 6 of them. But there are slightly more sounds, but we're going to go through these first, and they'll give you a good idea of the sounds that you get in Mandarin Chinese. Okay, so the first one is ah. Next one is o. Next one is next e. Next, oo, and last one is yu. Typically, this one seems a little bit confusing to English speakers because it's simply not a letter we're familiar with. But all it is just representing the sound yu as opposed to oo. Okay, they're both kind of U sounds, but they represent distinct vowel sounds. In reality, you should not be intimidated by this one because those are all just symbols representing the different sounds, and make sure that you're not necessarily associating them with the ones you would use in English necessarily. They're just approximating the sounds we have in Mandarin Chinese because it is a different language after all. Okay, but we're still just using our letters in order to represent the ways that the sounds seem to kind of create a good approximation of what we're looking at. And then in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down the pinyin, the way that the letters, the way the sounds are written, and trying to understand exactly the sounds that are represented by them, not just the approximations that maybe pinyin tries to make. Because the way that pinyin was developed is it tries to make, it tries to let an English speaker speak approximately what the Chinese characters are read like in Mandarin Chinese without having sufficient training. So it kind of looks like what it sounds, but it's not exactly. So we're going to kind of break it down even more and make sure that we're looking at this in proper detail. Okay. Yeah, these are the 6 vowels. Make sure you practice the basic vowel sounds, and they are combined in the following ways to make the 37 finals. Okay. So the pattern of making a final is you use a vowel or multiple vowels and add an optional ending of N or NG. Okay, not all combinations are represented just because not all of them are used in Mandarin Chinese, but these are the ones that are used. Okay, I'm going to go through and read these. Just as a warning though, the sounds in the previous slide are for the most part represented here, but sometimes there are a couple ones that do insert themselves in, so listen closely, okay? Even though we use the same 6 vowel letters, okay? Ah, I, an, ang, ao, a, un, i, ya, yen, yang, yao, ye, yin, yin, yong, yo, o, ong, o, u, wa, wai, wang, wan, wei, wen, wo, yue, yu, yuan, yun, yung, yo, Okay, so this is the pronunciation of all of those endings, and we'll see kind of how they interplay. For some examples of combining the initials and finals, we can take the initial g and add ong to get gong. Another example is taking fo and the ending o to make fo. Next is mo and a to make ma. Next is he and ang to make hang. As another example, sometimes you don't even need an initial. Okay, so some syllables take just the final and no initial, and that's totally okay. The initial is optional. Okay, so in this example, no initial, final is ow, and obviously you get ow. Okay, so this is all nice and easy. All of this, nice and easy. But there are a number of exceptions in Pinyin that we need to be aware of, in terms of that there are both orthographic ones, as well as just a couple of combinations that kind of sound a little different than you may think they would. Okay, so we're just going to go through that. When there is no initial present, so just like in this last case here, where there's no initial, in any such case, when we just take a final, no initial, and a final, we get these cases. Okay, when the final begins with an A, E, or O, and A, or O, you get no change. Okay, so effectively you get A, I, An, Ang, Ao, A, N, O as the different kinds of no initial syllables that start with A, E, or O, but in Mandarin Chinese. For whatever reason, there is no even though it is a valid final. It's just not something that's represented in Mandarin Chinese. Okay. The reason that I'm writing these this way is because here we're kind of indicating that it's a stem. So like for instance, we could write ang like this way to show that there's stuff more here. But we're kind of looking at this in general for stuff that has a stem starting with A, but there could still be more after it. Okay, so this could be for a, ang, ao, or anything like that. Okay, so that's what I mean by using the two dashes, and that it's a final, but we're also considering things that could happen after that. So it's essentially finals that are starting with A, finals that are starting with E, finals that are starting with O. Okay, next over here we have the orthographic change of I going to Y when it's at the beginning of the final. Okay. So for instance, we have ya, yen, yang, yao, ye, yin, yong, yo, yo. Okay, so for instance, what this came from is the final ya, just changing this to ya just because it looks a little bit more natural when you write. But essentially, you're just saying ya, ya, okay, but you're writing it with a y. The exception, though, is when we just have I, and we're basically having no initial plus I is the final. This ends up being yi, okay, because it would be weird to write just Y as yi. Okay, so we don't do that. We write Y-I. Yi. Okay. Next is U goes to W, and we get wu, wa, why, wang, wan, wei, wen, wo, weng. Okay, and so for instance here we have UO, and it becomes wo by changing the U to a W. And the exception here is pretty similar in that we're just taking, sorry, this should be U. U turns into WU, okay, but it's still pronounced wu, okay, just the U sound. Okay, because again, writing W would be kind of weird. Okay, so U changes to wu. Okay, and I guess I should have not written this there because that's the exception. Okay, so U changes to wu, 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 and then we have all the other subsidiary ones. Wa, wai, wang, wan, wei, wen, wo, weng. Okay, and then here we have U changes to U in all cases, no exception. Okay, and so we had the U changes to U, and then Yue, Yue, and Yuan, and Yun. Okay, all changes to those ones. Okay, so this is basically what's meant by when we write a Y, W, and the YU. We're really just representing the I's using U. And just representing it in a way that kind of looks a little more natural when it's read to an English speaker. Okay. There are a couple endings that have multiple sounds, specifically the E ending and the I ending. Okay. When the E is preceded by an M, we get the sound M. Okay? In all other cases, we say E as which is actually what's known as a diphthong, meaning that there are two vowel sounds tacked together. Okay? So when we say the E, we say those are the two vowel sounds we're putting together. And that's in all these cases, but here it's just m, just one vowel sound. So we have m, and then in this row we have d, t, n, l, g, k, h, j, ch, sh, r, z, c, s. Okay, so that's how the E goes. It's really only if you remember moi, you basically got it all. Okay. Next we have the I's, which are pronounced as you think they would in the top row, but in the bottom row, they kind of continue the retroflex consonant. So in these cases, you get zh, ch, sh. You're basically just saying the consonant, and then in these ones, it's kind of a buzzed I. Sorry, this is also retroflex. And then in the alveolar ones, we get z, c, s, and it's kind of a buzzed I, a little bit shorter. Okay, I'll read the top ones as well. E, B, P, Mi, D, T, Ni, Li, Ji, Chi, Shi. Okay, so as you would expect based on what we know about the I, and these ones, it's Zh, Ch, Sh, R, Z, C, S. These are also the names of the actual initial consonants themselves. So when we write down ZH as a consonant, we refer to it as Zh. When we write C as a consonant, we refer to it as S. Okay, so we're basically just saying the names of the consonants, and the I, in a sense, is kind of just a formality on that to make it look more readable. Okay. Next, we have pinyin spelling changes, which I personally think are a huge pain and completely unnecessary. But it's a total standard in pinyin. That's why I wrote here aya, which is basically the Chinese way of saying oi. It basically just means it's kind of a bit of a pain, and I personally think that, but unfortunately it's something that we have to deal with since it's something so widely used in pinyin. Having an awareness of this will make sure that you don't sound like an American when you say Chinese words, because these are common places to slip up, because they're not necessarily spelled like you think they should be. Okay, so the first one is the final UO. When it is after a B, bo, P, po, or M, mo, or for as well, we actually change the UO to just O, even though we pronounce it like a UO. So we're saying bo, po, mo, and for, even though we're writing bo, po, mo, for with just an O. Okay, that's the first orthographic change. Next one is UEI changes to UI. Okay, so really, like for instance, if we take due, what we really are saying is due, but in all cases, we change it to UI just for simplicity. I think it's a pain because it makes it written different than what you actually say, but it's apparently a little more concise, and that's why that's used as a spelling change. Okay, but the way these are pronounced is dui, tui, gui, kui, hui, jui, chui, shui, rui, zui, cui, sui. Okay, and the exception here is wei, which again is like when we have no initial, we instead go to just the rule that changes the U to a W. Okay, and then we ignore taking away the E, because WI would definitely look a little too weird to say we. We'd want to say we. Okay, these ones maybe you kind of could argue it's pronounced jue, xue, xue, but this one probably looks a little too weird, so that's why they kept it as we. Okay, next one is uen turns to un, and similarly we have jun, chun, lun, gun, kun, hun, jun, chun, shun, run, sun, sun, and similarly it's except for wen, which is uen, changing the U into WEN. Next one is IOU to IU, and in this case we have miao, dio, nio, liu, jiu, qiu, xiu. Okay, in all these cases you really pronounce the O even though it's not written. And the exception is IOU changing into YOU, yo. Okay. Next one is that we change a U in any case to, U in any case to a U after a Ji, Qi, or Xi. Okay, the exceptions are Yue, Yu, Yuan, and Yun, which also kind of remove the little umlaut, which we kind of touched on before when we took the umlaut and we changed it to yu. That's kind of absorbed into that little rule. But here we have jue, xue, xue, ju, chu, xu, juan, quan, xuan, jun, chun, xun, even though in all these cases we're really imagining in our head that there are two dots here. The reason we can do this is because without the two dots, these syllables don't exist in Mandarin, so there's really no ambiguity with what we're writing. You never want to say ju or chu or shu. It's always ju, chu, or shu, just because that's the standard. And it's just something you got to remember when you read this. If you want more clarity, you can write it for yourself with the two dots, but all the time you're going to see it without the two dots. And this is just so we can avoid having to write the two dots, as they're not necessarily so easy to write with a computer. Okay. Here we have the only ones that actually incorporate the two dots, the only syllables, and they're nue, lue, nu, lu. Okay. If you are on a computer and you cannot type these, what you can do is you can replace the U with a V. This is a bit of a standard if you can't have a computer that writes the little U with the umlaut. So you get nue, lue, nu, lu. Kind of looks a little weird, but I think it's actually not that bad of a replacement because a V kind of looks like a U, and a V is the only letter not used in Pinyin anyway, so it kind of makes sense. But if you can, try to write it this way just because it looks a little better and more people will understand it that way. Okay, so a couple more endings that are a little bit weird that I had both in the last row. These are the ones in the last row on that slide way before when I had all the endings, and then also this other one that I had bolded before. The ending IAN is not like the ending IA or IANG. Okay, the way you read this is yen, even though this one is ya and yang. Okay, so ya, yen, yang. Okay, so you'd want to think that this is pronounced yan, but it's not. Okay, even though it's written in a way that would suggest that, when you think about ya and yang, you really want to say yen. It's kind of a little bit more like an E. Kind of. Not quite. It's not yen, it's yen. Yen. It's kind of a vowel sound that's not really represented by any other letters, so they use an A to do a best guess, even though it's not like ya or yang. Okay? So here, it's not yan, it's yen. Here, it's not bian, it's bien. And then pian, mian, dian, tian, nian, lian, jian, qian, xian. Okay? This one I think is actually pretty important because this will help your pronunciation a bunch. Don't pronounce these ones like they look. Pronounce it like I'm telling you to. It's like yen, bien, pian, okay, like that. This one is only found in the neutral case when we have the no initial plus U-E-N-G, making wung. Okay, same with this one. You only have nothing plus I-O equals yo, and ER, nothing plus ER is Okay, these are just weird ones. To my knowledge, this one is only used for one character, and that is kind of the equivalent of saying "oh." So it's kind of a rare one. This one I know is used in a couple characters, and this one as well. But they are kind of weird in that they never ever take any sort of consonant initial. They're only just by themselves. Okay? We're going to finish with a little mini quiz, or in Chinese as we say, a xiao kao. Xiao kao. Okay. I'm going to point to these ones as we go around, and then you're going to say them, and then I'll say them, and we'll see kind of how we do. Okay. We're going to go first with this one. Nong, na, tie, xu, ru, heng, jia, ling, jun, ce, miao, yan, wu, zhi, cu, qiong, wo, yi, chi, ze, lü, wang, yu, zhe, yuan. Okay, so there's some notes that I think may have been little trip-up points. Make sure on this one you pronounce this like yu, even though it's not written. Okay, this one pretty straightforward, straightforward, straightforward. Xu, straightforward, straightforward, pretty straightforward, straightforward. This one again, pronounced the yu, jun. This one's straightforward. Maybe this is a little bit of a difficult consonant. You know, these ones also are kind of difficult consonants for English speakers to pronounce, the zh and the ts ones. Okay, but same thing. Big E sound, c. Okay, miao, yan. Remember to pronounce this kind of like an E-ish, not like an A, because remember this is the I-A-N ending. All right, here is wu, not woo. Okay, you don't really pronounce this W. This isn't really there. Remember, this is just the orthographic change U to WU, so it looks nicer. But we're really just saying woo. And remember, here we have the short I, and we're just continuing the retroflex consonant. And same thing here. Ch. Okay. Here we also have another orthographic change, I to YI, E. And here another one, wo to wo. Same here, yu to yu. This one's straightforward. This one's another orthographic change, yu, in to yuan. Same here, wang to wang. And this one, don't forget just to pronounce this correctly, even though it's explicitly there. Qiong miao. All this should be pretty intuitive, but I hope this helped kind of organize and give you a little more insight onto the details of Mandarin Chinese finals. Because I know there's a lot of details and there's a lot of rules, but if you really begin to think about these actively and master them, it will make sure that when you read Pinyin, you don't sound like just an American reading it. You'll sound more genuine, like you actually know what you're doing, and that's important when you're speaking another language and you're trying to impress other people. Okay, so I hope you found this video informational. I hope you found the mini quiz helpful, and yeah, thank you for watching.